She wasn't a student. She wasn't faculty. Just a black janitor cleaning chalk dust at midnight. But when a smug professor dared her to solve a calculus problem, she did more than solve it. She shattered the room. Cameras caught it. The internet erupted, and by morning the university had erased her access card. But what they didn't erase was her past. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Brightmoor University wasn't just prestigious, it was exclusion, with ivy vines. Tucked in the blue hills of rural Virginia, the red brick buildings stood like monuments to generational power. Inside, the walls whispered old money, and the curriculum catered to future senators, CEOs, and legacy graduates. On the surface, the campus boasted diversity posters and equity statements, but inside the lines were still drawn, silent, racial, and unbroken. The students were mostly white. Their world was artisanal coffee, curated playlists, Patagonia fleeces, and quiet entitlement. They floated across campus with confidence passed down like heirlooms. The janitorial staff, by contrast, moved in shadows, mostly black, mostly invisible, cleaning what they couldn't afford, fixing what they were never allowed to use. And Alora Gaines had learned to move like a ghost. At 38, Alora had mastered silence. Each night she pushed her cleaning cart down polished hallways, her keys jangling softly with the rhythm of footsteps no one heard. She scrubbed the same lecture halls where young men twice her age debated philosophies she'd mastered years ago. Her work badge read, Facilities Associate, but it didn't list her SAT score, or the scholarship she once won, or the dream she lost at Brightmoor 2 decades earlier. She wiped away chalk she could solve, replaced trash beneath posters that said Black Minds Matter. And every time she looked at a math board, her fingers ached to pick up the chalk, not for validation, but because math was still the only place where logic ruled, and color didn't matter. Until color entered the room. On a rainy Thursday evening, Alora stepped into Lecture Hall B to clean up after a late study session. Students had left coffee cups, torn notes, and a half-erased problem sprawling across the board. A complex integral with multiple variables. She studied it for a second. Old instincts stirred. Her hand moved before her mind could catch up. She picked up the chalk. And that's when the door creaked open. Dr. Colin Barrick stood at the entrance, umbrella still dripping. He paused, cold eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Department chair of mathematics. A man of prestige, reputation, and deeply coded disdain. He stared at the janitor, touching the chalkboard. You do know that board isn't for doodling, he said coolly. Alora froze. I was just cleaning it. With chalk in your hand? She hesitated. There was still an equation. You don't need to worry about that part, he cut in, stepping forward. Just the trash. That's your territory. His words weren't loud, but they echoed, not because of their volume, but their intention. A reminder, her place wasn't up there, not in that world. She lowered the chalk, wiped the board clean, without a word, and pushed her cart out of the room, every wheel squeaking like an insult. Back in her supply closet, Alora shut the door behind her and sat in the dark for a moment, her breath shallow, her chest tight. The walls of the tiny closet held more than mops. They held her other life, her truth. At the bottom of a milk crate, beneath latex gloves and floor wax, sat a worn leather notebook. She opened it with reverence. Equations, graphs, theorems. Some pages held unfinished work from years ago. Others had fresh ink, problems she solved in the quiet after midnight. She didn't write them to prove anything. She wrote them to stay sane. Alora had once been Brightmoor's brightest. A scholarship student from Richmond. First-generation college student. She arrived with advanced placement credits and a love for numbers that couldn't be taught. Her professors noticed. Her classmates didn't, until she scored higher than all of them on an exam. Then they noticed everything. The accusation was swift. A white roommate claimed Alora had stolen her notes. Another said she'd seen her cheat during the final. The dean's office acted fast. Her full ride disappeared before she could mount a defense. Her name was erased. Quietly, efficiently, no press, no protests, just silence. Now she mopped the very halls where she was once meant to lecture. And nobody knew, until the notebook slipped out of hiding. The next afternoon, a freshman janitor named Isaiah was searching for more paper towels when he knocked over a stack in Alora's closet. The notebook tumbled out. Curious, he flipped it open, then froze. He couldn't understand most of it. but he recognized brilliance. Later that day, Isaiah showed the notebook to Jared, a sophomore math major. "Look at this," he whispered. "This ain't normal." Jared flipped through it, jaw slowly lowering. This is advanced multivariable calculus. She solved the last theorem Dr. Barrett gave us, and she did it better. He turned the page. "And this? I've only seen this in grad school material. Wait, is this her handwriting?" Isaiah nodded. "Alora, night shift. Quiet lady. Been here years." Jared stared at the pages, then at the name scribbled in the corner. E. Gaines. "Alora Gaines," he said aloud. "She's the janitor?" "Yeah." Jared blinked. "Then why the hell is she solving proofs no one else on campus can?" The question hung in the air, like a secret no one was ready for. But secrets don't stay quiet at Brightmoor. By the next morning, whispers filled the hallways. "The janitor's a genius. She cracked Barrick's theorem. I heard she's ex-MIT." Alora noticed the shift before she heard the words. Students looked at her longer. Some nodded. A few whispered and walked faster. She didn't know what they knew, only that something had changed. And change, at Brightmoor, is dangerous. That night she returned to the closet and reached for her notebook. It wasn't in the crate. She dug under the gloves, moved the cleaners, panic rising. Then she saw it, placed neatly on top of the mop handle, slightly open. She flipped through it. A note had been written in the margin of her last equation. Elegant, but flawed. "Try again. See." Her fingers trembled. Her breath stopped. Barrick had read it. A forgotten notebook covered in advanced math scribbles is found in the janitor's closet, and it's not the professor's. The notebook was never meant to be found. Alora had hidden it deep within her supply closet, wedged between industrial cleaning bottles and rolls of paper towels. It was a private thing, sacred even, her only remaining link to the woman she once imagined herself becoming. Yet, as the news of its discovery crept through the corridors of Brightmoor, it began to take on a new shape. Not just a personal outlet, but a quiet rebellion. A whisper that said, "You judged wrong." The whispers started small. A couple of math majors lingering near the janitor's closet. A graduate assistant asking about that weird notebook someone found. It wasn't long before the wrong people started paying attention. Elora noticed the shift. Students who once brushed past her without eye contact now gave her uncertain glances. Some even nodded. One left a sticky note on the closet door. "You solved what I couldn't. Respect." But Elora didn't feel respected. She felt exposed. Every page of that notebook was a memory of nights sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table under a flickering bulb, solving equations while her cousins laughed at cartoons in the next room, of scholarships won, interviews aced, and the fateful day she walked through Brightmoor's gates as a freshman with stars in her eyes and AP credits in her pocket. Before it all fell apart. Before they accused her of cheating. Before the dean, a man who never learned her name, signed off on her dismissal with barely a glance at the facts. Elora had never told anyone the full story. It wasn't just pain, it was shame. And for years she buried it beneath a life of surviving. Scrubbing. Silence. Now, that life was cracking. Back in the math building, Jared and the janitor who found the notebook stared at the pages like they had unearthed treasure. But the hallway wasn't as empty as they thought. Dr. Colin Barrick had seen the two loitering earlier. His office door had creaked open just enough to hear snippets of conversation. His suspicions turned to annoyance when he heard the name on the notebook. Gaines. He rose from his desk slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt, as if preparing for battle. In his mind, genius didn't wear custodial uniforms. It wore tweed blazers and had legacies. His kind of genius, not hers. "May I see that?" Barrick's voice was polite, but Jared flinched at the sound of it. Authority dripped from the professor's tone like oil from an overused machine. The janitor hesitated, then handed over the notebook. Barrick flipped through it silently. His brow furrowed, then rose. He recognized the problems. Some were from his lectures. Others were beyond his curriculum. One equation had been unsolved in his own research paper. And there it was. Solved. Neatly. Elegantly. "Where did you say this came from?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the page. "Closet," the janitor replied. "Under the sink. Belongs to the woman who works nights. Gaines, I think." Barrick closed the notebook and handed it back with a tight-lipped smile. "Interesting." That evening, Alora returned to the closet and felt the shift before she even touched the door. Her notebook was out of place, slightly ajar from where she had wedged it. She opened it, flipped to the last solved page. Someone had written in the margin, "Impressive, but incomplete. CB." She stared at the initials. Her stomach dropped. Barrick. He knew. The next few nights, Alora worked in silence, constantly looking over her shoulder. The air around campus had changed. Her name was being said in rooms she hadn't cleaned yet. Students whispered when she passed, some with admiration, others with mockery, a few with fear. She was becoming a ghost that haunted the halls of their safe assumption. But none of it prepared her for what happened 3 nights later. She entered Lecture Hall B, the same room where Barrick had belittled her, and found a problem on the board. It was massive, a dense layered calculus theorem that spanned the length of the chalkboard, written in precise handwriting, not Barrick's usual academic scrawl. This was theatrical. Below it, a note. "If you're as brilliant as they say, solve this." See, she felt heat crawl up her spine. It wasn't an invitation. It was a performance. A trap. Alora stood frozen for several seconds. The room was empty, but she knew better. She turned slowly, and saw it, a tiny red light on a camera tucked between 2 ceiling beams. She was being watched. She should have walked away, left the chalk untouched, let them think whatever they wanted. But something deep, old and tired inside her snapped. She picked up the chalk. The sound of it against the board echoed like a challenge in a silent courtroom. Her mind unfolded into its familiar rhythm. Clean, logical, relentless. One line led to the next. Her fingers moved without hesitation. Variables bowed to her will. Fractions collapsed, reformed, and resolved. By the time she stopped, the board was full, clean, elegant, undeniable. She dropped the chalk back into the tray and turned away. But Barrick had already seen it. In his office, connected to the hidden camera, he watched the entire solution unfold in real time. His hand resting on the edge of his desk, clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. There was no denying it anymore. The janitor had outperformed him. Publicly. And now, he would make her pay for it. A smug, tenured professor named Dr. Colin Barrick reads her notes and sets a trap. The next day brought more than just murmurs. It brought eyes, and not the kind Alora was used to. As she walked past the campus quad with her cleaning cart in tow, students turned their heads, some with awe, some with confusion, and a few with unmistakable contempt. But the worst looks came from the faculty, those tight-lipped middle-aged academics who clutched their titles like shields. Something unspoken had been violated. A line. She had crossed it. In the mathematics department, Alora had become a legend in real time. Students speculated about her background, her knowledge, her motives. She used to be a professor at MIT, one whispered. She's a failed genius trying to make a comeback, another claimed. None of them knew the truth, but one man thought he did. Dr. Colin Barrick. If there was one thing he couldn't abide, it was the erosion of order, of hierarchy. A janitor dazzling his students was a threat, not just to his ego, but to the institution he represented. He needed to re-establish dominance. Publicly. The plan came together quickly. That Thursday, Barrick announced a special lecture during the 5 p.m. Advanced Calculus seminar, usually reserved for seniors and graduate students. He sent a departmental memo. Today's lecture will be open to observers. Unexpected demonstration to follow. Alora didn't get the memo, but she got the invitation. Around 4:45 p.m., as she emptied trash bins in the main lecture hall, Barrick entered with a rare, almost pleasant smile. "Miss Gaines," he said smoothly, "I hear you have a talent for numbers." She paused, then nodded warily. "Wonderful," he said. "Would you indulge us with a bit of that brilliance? Just a small problem on the board. We'd be honored." She knew better. But too many eyes were on her now. To walk away would be surrender. And Alora had surrendered enough in her life. At 5:02 p.m., Alora entered the packed lecture hall. Students lined the seats, phones ready, whispers buzzing. Barrick stood before the chalkboard, with the confidence of a man about to humiliate someone.
"Ladies and gentlemen," he began.
"Today, we witnessed something unorthodox. Our own Miss Gaines, custodian by title, has shown a deep affinity for our beloved calculus. Let us test the merit." He turned and wrote an equation that spiraled across the board. A monster of nested functions, advanced integrals, multivariable chaos. He stepped back, capped the chalk. Miss Gaines, if you would. Silence. Alora stepped forward slowly. She could feel her heartbeat in her teeth. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But she didn't. She reached for the chalk. Her hands didn't shake. Her mind locked in. She stared at the equation, parsing each layer like a map. She didn't solve it linearly. She attacked it from the inside out. Students leaned forward. The room felt suspended in breath. Line by line, she dismantled Barrick's challenge. But it wasn't just about solving. It was about style. She made it beautiful. After 10 minutes, she placed the chalk down. The board was no longer a battlefield. It was art. A pause. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then thunder. Barrick smiled tightly. Well done, he said. Though I fear it was a bit rehearsed. The applause died. He turned back to the board and pointed to one corner. What if we add this condition? He scribbled a constraint that shifted the problem into another level of difficulty. The crowd gasped. Still feel up to it. Alora didn't hesitate. She grabbed the chalk and went right back in. Faster this time. Sharper. Within minutes, the board exploded in logic and elegance. It was irrefutable. She stepped back again. The room didn't clap this time. They stood. And that's when the camera flashes started. Dozens of students uploaded the moment in real time. Janitor solves unsolvable calculus proof. One caption read, Professor gets owned by custodian, said another. Barrick stood stiffly, face frozen in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had tried to trap her, but instead he'd set her free. Alora doesn't just solve the equation, she redefines it. And someone just posted the video online, going viral within hours. The chalk hadn't even settled back into the tray before the lecture hall erupted. But it wasn't noise that filled the room, it was stunned silence. Dozens of students sat frozen, mouths parted, their eyes dancing between the sprawling board and the woman who had just rewritten what they thought they knew. A janitor, a nobody in their minds. Until now. Alora stepped back slowly, her hands calm, her breath steady. She didn't need their approval. She never had. But for the first time in years, she had let her mind speak out loud, and the silence felt like freedom. Barrick stood to the side, arms folded. His smile remained, but it had calcified into something tight and bitter. He looked at the board not like a teacher assessing a student's work, but like a man watching his own authority unravel. The elegance of her solution was undeniable. Not only had she solved his problem, she had restructured it. She had cut through layers of complexity using methods none of his graduate students had ever dared. She didn't follow his format. She made her own. And that, perhaps, was the greatest insult. One student in the third row, barely old enough to grow facial hair, pulled out his phone and started recording. Not because he understood what she'd done, but because he knew he had just seen something he'd never forget. Another leaned over and whispered, "Who is she?" Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs into awe. Awe into something close to fear. Barrick cleared his throat. "Thank you, Miss Gaines. That was illuminating." He moved to erase the board, but paused halfway. For a fraction of a second his hand hovered above the chalk. Then he dropped it as if the board itself had turned to fire. Students began clapping. First one, then two, then a wave. Not everyone clapped, but enough did to mark the moment. Alora didn't stay for applause. She turned, walked down the stairs with the same quiet grace she always carried, and pushed open the heavy doors of Lecture Hall B. Outside, the sun had dipped. Golden light washed across the quad. She didn't smile, but something deep inside her stirred. A whisper, a flicker. "You are not invisible." That evening, the clip made its rounds, uploaded by an anonymous student. It was just under 4 minutes long. No context, no commentary, just a janitor in navy blue overalls, solving one of the hardest calculus problems ever written on a campus blackboard, and doing it flawlessly. The internet did the rest. She solved what now? Tell me that's not real. A janitor just cooked a tenured professor on his own turf. Reddit picked it up first, then a few math forums. Then someone tweeted it with the caption, "When the janitor knows more than your $80,000 a year professor." By morning it had crossed 1 million views. Inside Brightmoor's administration building, chaos brewed. Dean Myrtle Evans stared at the video from her office, eyes narrowing. She didn't care about calculus. She cared about headlines. And right now, the headlines weren't flattering. Her phone buzzed. Another journalist. This time from NPR. "Yes, "We're aware of the situation," she said curtly into the receiver. "No, Miss Gaines is not faculty. She's part of our facilities team. Yes, it is being looked into." She hung up, cursed under her breath. Then she summoned Barrick. He arrived tight-lipped, still in denial. "What the hell happened?" she asked. "A stunt," he replied flatly. "A moment. Nothing more." "The world doesn't think so," she snapped, turning her monitor to show him the trending video. "They think we're idiots, elitists, or worse." He glanced at the screen and offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "If we ignore it, it dies. She'll fade back into obscurity." The dean leaned back, drumming her nails. "Or it gets bigger. Especially if she's the real deal." Barrick didn't flinch. "She's not. Then prove it." Meanwhile, Alora returned to her small apartment on the edge of campus, unaware of the firestorm she had triggered. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Unknown numbers, social media tags, even her rarely used email inbox had exploded. She didn't open any of it. She made tea, sat on the floor, stared at her notebook, and wept. But they weren't tears of fear or shame. They were years of silence melting off her chest. For the first time since she'd been expelled, someone had seen her. But not everyone saw her as a miracle. Some saw her as a threat. The next morning, she arrived at her usual time, 9:30 p.m. The math building always came last on her rotation. She saved it for the end, because it was the quietest, the most familiar. But as she reached the back door, her keycard beeped red. She tried again. Red. She moved to the front entrance. Another beep. Another red. She frowned, pulled out her phone and opened the campus scheduling app. Her assignments had been changed. She was no longer assigned to the math building. In fact, the math wing had been marked restricted maintenance, external vendor. Her chest tightened. She called her supervisor. He didn't answer. She called again. Nothing. The realization settled like ash. She had been locked out, erased. Again, she stood at the door for several long seconds. The building that once taught her to dream now barred her completely. And this time, not with accusations or policies, with silence. Back in his office, Barrick closed the admin dashboard with a flick of his mouse. The schedule changes were live. "We control access," he murmured to himself. "Let the internet rave. Let them tweet. But she'll never step foot in this department again." He leaned back, smug, until his inbox pinged. He clicked. One new message. Subject line: a correction on page 3. Attached a scanned image of one of his own published research papers. Highlighted in red, a miscalculation in his proof. Beneath it, a handwritten correction, initialed. E.g., that night, Alora's janitor schedule is mysteriously adjusted, locking her out of the math building. But by morning, Barrick receives an anonymous email, correcting an error in his own published paper. Signed, E. By dawn, Alora's name wasn't just whispered in Brightmoor's corridors. It was trending. Within 48 hours of the calculus video going live, it had crossed 3.2 million views. The clip had been dissected by TikTok duets, Twitter threads, Reddit debates, and even YouTube breakdowns by math channels trying to explain what exactly Alora had done on that blackboard. To Black communities, especially those within academic and intellectual spaces, she was a revelation. Articles popped up titled "The Hidden Genius in Overalls," and from custodian to calculus queen. Influencers praised her brilliance. Professors at HBCUs tweeted support. One post read, "Alora Gaines didn't break into math. She just let herself out of the cage." But not everyone cheered. On conservative media circuits, the narrative shifted. Commentators dismissed her as a publicity stunt, a diversity plant, or worse. One news anchor sarcastically asked, "Should we start hiring janitors to teach next semester?" The culture war machine revved up. Brightmoor University, already infamous for its old money elitism, was suddenly under a spotlight they didn't request. National outlets reached out for comments. Civil rights organizations requested interviews. A journalist from The Atlantic camped outside the West Gate, with a press badge and a hope to speak with the janitor who solved calculus. Inside the university, administration was split. A portion of the leadership saw opportunity, diversity brochures, donor campaigns. The optics were ripe for monetization. But others, particularly the old guard, saw danger. If Alora was real, if her academic past was ever exposed, then it wasn't just a feel-good moment. It was a reckoning. And no one feared that reckoning more than Dr. Lionel March. Now nearing retirement, Dr. March was quiet, sharp, and calculating. 20 years ago, as head of academic integrity, he had overseen Alora's expulsion for alleged cheating. He'd barely remembered her name until it resurfaced in a faculty meeting. The meeting was heated. Administrators and professors bickered about PR, legal exposure, and student outrage. "We cannot let social media dictate university standards," Barrick said firmly. "But she is the standard now," replied a young adjunct. "What if she's really a genius? We let her mop floors while—" March cut in. "Her name is familiar. I believe I signed her dismissal papers. Back in—" The room fell silent. The younger faculty looked stunned. The older ones looked away. "Dismissal?" the dean asked slowly. March nodded. "Academic dishonesty. Roommate claimed she cheated. A few irregularities. We didn't press further. She disappeared." "Do we still have the file?" someone asked. March stiffened. "It should be sealed," he said. "No need to revisit ancient history." But it was too late. That night, a graduate assistant working in the records office received a late email from the dean's office. A search request. Student file. Name, Alora Gaines. Year. The assistant searched the archive database. One result. Confidential expulsion file E. Gaines. She clicked. Access denied. She tried again using the master key. File access locked. Archive request only. Standard for sealed disciplinary cases. She submitted the request for archive retrieval. The next morning, the file was gone. Outside, Brightmoor's campus boiled with tension. Students were picking sides. Some wore printed shirts with chalkboard equations and EG initials on the back. Others argued she was a fraud, a plant, or an opportunist. Campus forums were flooded. An anonymous post read, "Y'all really think a janitor just solved calculus? Get real, this is woke fantasy." But beneath the noise, a deeper fear ran through the administration. Because if Alora had once been a student, a good one, a brilliant one, and they expelled her without cause, then the problem wasn't just math. It was systemic. Alora remained silent through it all. She didn't grant interviews, didn't respond to messages. She continued working her shifts, now reassigned to the older buildings. Students stared. Some thanked her. Others avoided eye contact entirely. She moved through the buzz like a ghost again. But this time, they knew the ghost's name. One night, as she mopped a hallway near the philosophy wing, she paused by a vending machine. A young black student stood nearby, backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked at her for a long moment, then asked softly, "Did they really make you stop cleaning the math building?" She nodded. He hesitated, then said, "They're scared of you, you know." She turned, eyes sharp. "Why would they be scared of a janitor?" He held her gaze. "Because you make them irrelevant." Meanwhile, inside the registrar's office, something shifted. The assistant who had tried to access Alora's file received a plain envelope on her desk. No return address, no note. Inside, a printed sheet. A scan. The top read, Brightmoor University, Office of Academic Integrity. Expulsion memo. Student Alora Gaines. Reason, alleged plagiarism. No investigation conducted. Below it, handwritten in blue pen, this file was sealed to protect the department, not the truth. She stared at it, heart racing, then copied it, scanned it, emailed it to herself, and sent an anonymous email to the campus newspaper. Subject line, "You need to know who she really is." Attached the file. Back in his home office, Dr. March received an alert. University database access. Unauthorized scan detected. His face tightened. He picked up the phone. "We have a leak," he told Barrick. "She's not staying buried much longer." Barrick sighed. "Then we make sure what comes out looks like an accident." March narrowed his eyes. "I'll take care of it." A sealed expulsion file from 2005 is quietly removed from archives. But a scanned copy just landed in the inbox of Brightmoor's student newspaper, and someone plans to publish it. Long before the whispers, the videos, and the chalkboard that shook a lecture hall, there was a girl with a medal. She stood on a stage in Baltimore, 17 years old, wearing a second-hand blazer 2 sizes too big, clutching a gold medallion that read National Mathematics Invitational Champion. Alora Gaines had been radiant that day. Cameras flashed. Newspapers called her a prodigy. She was the first student in her district's history, and one of the few black women nationally to win first place in that competition. That single moment changed everything. Offers poured in, recommendations, Ivy League invitations. But she chose Brightmoor. It wasn't the most prestigious, but it had a clean math program, a quiet campus, and a full-ride scholarship. More importantly, it had promise, a place where she believed she could disappear into numbers and not skin. She arrived on campus with a backpack full of textbooks and a heart full of hope. Her dorm walls were bare, except for two things: her competition photo and a sticky note that read, "Numbers don't discriminate." She didn't make friends easily. She wasn't there for parties or small talk. Elora was there to work, and work she did. By mid-semester, she was top of her calculus class. Her linear algebra professor told colleagues she had PhD-level thinking in a freshman body. Her handwritten proofs were used in lecture slides. Her tutors started asking her for help. Then came the scholarship dinner. Elora walked in wearing a navy dress. Her aunt had sewn and sat beside her roommate, a white girl named Bryn Hollinger. Bryn came from Legacy. Her father had funded Brightmoor's economics wing. She was polite in public, dismissive in private. Elora had never trusted her, but that night, Bryn leaned close and smiled thinly. "Don't get too comfortable," she whispered. "This place has a way of sorting people." 2 days later, everything shattered. Elora had just turned in a paper on complex number systems. Within hours, she received an urgent email from the Office of Academic Integrity. Allegation, plagiarism. She was stunned. She hadn't copied a word. When she arrived at the dean's office, Dr. Lionel March sat waiting. His expression was indifferent, cold. "Your roommate claims she found your essay and saw you copying from her draft." Elora's voice cracked. "That's a lie. I did my own work." He slid a document across the table. Her paper, marked with red. "There are similarities. We must take this seriously." No one asked about her track record. No one asked how she had submitted the paper hours before Bryn. No one questioned why a national math champion would cheat on a basic theory essay. There was no hearing, no defense, just a decision. Expelled, effective immediately. Her scholarship vanished. Her student ID was deactivated. Her dorm key stopped working. One moment she was Brightmoor's rising star. The next, she was a ghost. Elora didn't go home. She didn't want to answer questions. She lived in a friend's car for a few weeks, then in a shelter. She changed her name slightly, swapped middle and last names, and got a part-time job cleaning buildings. Over time, she found her way back to Brightmoor's campus, not as a student, but as a cleaner. No one recognized her. She let them forget. Until now, after the leaked expulsion document reached the student newspaper, everything changed. A group called Justice for Elora formed overnight. Led by students of color, they began combing through old yearbooks, archived newspapers, and academic journals. One volunteer, a junior journalism major named Talia Morgan, discovered an online link to the 2005 Brightmoor Freshman Honors Digest. And there it was. Page 12. A full-color photo of Elora Gaines, smiling beneath the headline, "Brightmoor welcomes national math champion." Same eyes. Same face. Only younger. Brighter. Talia printed it, stared at it, and whispered, "They really tried to erase her." She posted the photo on campus forums with the caption, "The janitor they silenced was once the genius they praised." This is her in 2005. It went viral. Students who had doubted her now had proof. Faculty who had remained silent were forced to acknowledge the truth. Back in his office, Dr. March saw the photo. He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes narrowed. Barrick called. "It's getting out of hand," March replied. "We underestimated her. What do we do now?" March looked out the window at the protesters beginning to gather. Pray she doesn't remember everything. But Elora remembered it all. That night, she sat in her apartment, holding the same medal she won in 2005. She had kept it hidden in a shoebox, wrapped in fabric, tarnished now, but still hers. There was a knock on the door. It was Talia. She held up the yearbook. "You don't know me, but I know who you are, and people need to hear it from you. Not us, not the posts, you." Elora hesitated. "I lost everything," she said quietly. "I don't want pity." "It's not pity," Talia replied. "It's truth, and you deserve to reclaim it." Elora didn't answer, but she let her in. A student group uncovers her 205 award photo buried in an old yearbook. They post it online, and it explodes. Now, Elora must decide whether to remain silent or reclaim the voice they once tried to erase. The protests began quietly, a single flyer on a brick wall outside the student union. Black and white, bold font, no graphics. who erased Alora Gaines. By the next morning, there were 100, then thousands, plastered across Brightmoor's campus, in lecture halls, in elevators, on dining hall trays. By noon, students had walked out. Black student groups took the lead. The African American Coalition for Equity, the Black STEM Alliance, and a rising student organization called Brightmoor Reclaimed coordinated their efforts with eerie precision. They wore matching black hoodies and carried signs with calculus equations beside Alora's face. The message was clear. This wasn't just about a janitor. It was about erasure, justice, and who gets to be called brilliant. They marched to the administration building and sat outside its granite steps in silence. For 6 hours. No chants. No megaphones. Just presence. Meanwhile, the university scrambled. The PR team held emergency meetings. The dean's office drafted a statement. It read, "Brightmoor University takes allegations of discrimination seriously. However, after thorough review, we have found no records of a student named Alora Gaines, enrolled during the years in question. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just bureaucratic denial. It was a mistake." The statement backfired instantly. Screenshots of Alora's yearbook photo, her scholarship certificate, and her name on the 2005 Dean's List flooded social media. One student tweeted, "She was your star before she became your secret. Now she's your reckoning." National figures weighed in. Prominent black academics shared the video. Civil rights leaders called it institutional theft. A senator retweeted a clip with the caption, "This is why we audit endowments." But inside Brightmoor's walls, the mood was far from apologetic. In a locked room on the 3rd floor of Carver Hall, faculty members sat in stiff silence. Dean Myrtle Evans stood at the head of the table, flanked by legal counsel. "We are not here to debate public perception," she said sharply. "We are here to contain the situation." Dr. Barrick tapped his pen. "She was never formally readmitted. She has no legal standing." A younger professor, Dr. Simone Hale, shifted in her chair, but she was illegally expelled. "We have documents. A student group published the original memo. This is going to escalate." Dean Evans turned slowly. "Then we contain the escalation. I will not allow Brightmoor to become a case study in failure." Dr. Hale frowned. "By pretending it never happened? By protecting the institution," the dean snapped. The room went quiet. Outside, student momentum built. Demonstrators set up tents on the quad. They called it Gaines Green. Every night, more students joined. Law students offered legal counsel. Art majors painted murals of Alora holding chalk like a torch. STEM students created an online archive of her documented work and released it under Creative Commons. Then, in a dramatic act of solidarity, 3 student body senators resigned on camera, citing the administration's denial. One of them said, "We were taught to pursue truth, but here truth is punished." And punishment followed. Privately, the administration began calling student leaders into closed-door meetings. Threats were subtle. Emails about scholarship reevaluation, random drug tests, academic reviews. One organizer was suddenly placed under investigation for inappropriate protest behavior, despite no record of misconduct. The students didn't back down, but the message was clear. The institution was tightening its grip. In the middle of it all, Alora watched in silence. She sat in the back of the protest some nights, hood up, face down. She didn't speak. She didn't chant. But when she saw her equations painted on protest signs, something in her chest cracked open. She had always believed her silence kept her safe. But maybe her silence had kept them safe. Then came the leak. On a stormy Tuesday night, an anonymous email landed in hundreds of inboxes across campus. Subject line: faculty meeting. Unedited audio. Listen. Attached was a 21-minute audio clip recorded from inside the closed-door meeting in Carver Hall. Voices were clear, identifiable. The clip captured Dean Evans dismissing the protests as a social fad, Dr. Barrick referring to Alora as a janitor with delusions, one unnamed faculty member saying, "It doesn't matter if she was a student, she's not the narrative we want." At the 18-minute mark, the most chilling quote: "If this continues, we'll make examples of the loudest students. Quiet the rest by fear." The audio spread like wildfire. Local news ran it within hours. A civil rights attorney tweeted, "This isn't damage control. It's institutional abuse. There will be consequences." That night, the tents on Gaines Green doubled. Faculty members began to break ranks. One tenured professor publicly apologized for his silence. Another offered to resign. And in a final blow, a student-led legal petition was filed requesting Alora Gaines's reinstatement, backdated to 2005 with full academic recognition and damages. The petition garnered 200,000 signatures in 24 hours. An anonymous email leaks faculty meeting audio. And it's damning. With national legal pressure mounting, Brightmoor is no longer just a school. It's the epicenter of a civil rights scandal. And Alora's name is now at the heart of a fight that could change everything. The morning after the leak, Brightmoor was unrecognizable. The campus quad buzzed, not with students rushing to class, but with reporters setting up live shots. Camera crews angled to capture the protest tents, still holding strong across Gaines Green. Microphones were shoved in faces. Students dodged questions. Faculty stayed silent, but no one could ignore what the audio had revealed. In 21 minutes, the mask had slipped. News outlets looped the worst lines. She's just a janitor with delusions. If this continues, we'll make examples of the loudest students. She's not the narrative we want. The quotes hit like shrapnel. Within hours, alumni called to demand answers. Some threatened to pull endowments. A few high-profile donors released statements condemning the administration. One trustee quietly resigned. Parents flooded the admissions office with emails titled, "Is this how you treat black students?" And through it all, Brightmoor's leadership issued a single sterile response. "We are investigating the authenticity of the audio file, and will respond accordingly." It was a corporate shrug in the middle of a cultural explosion. Inside her apartment, Alora watched it unfold through a flickering screen. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She grieved. Every time someone played that audio, she heard the truth she'd carried for decades, dismissed, denied, and now publicly broadcast. But with exposure came escalation. Barrett called an emergency faculty meeting that night. Only select members were invited. The doors were closed. No devices allowed. His voice trembled with controlled fury. "We are under siege. This isn't about fairness. It's a takedown." "You mean accountability?" Dr. Hale muttered. He ignored her. "The only path forward is reasserting academic credibility. We reframe the story." "How?" someone asked. Barrick held up a folder. Inside, cherry-picked screenshots, half-finished math notes from Alora's notebook, and an internal draft accusing her of pattern replication from existing research. "We suggest that her work, while compelling, is derivative," he said. A murmur went through the room. "You want to call her a plagiarist?" Dr. Hale asked, aghast. "We imply it, enough to sow doubt." There was silence. Then March, quietly lurking in the back, added, "It worked before." Meanwhile, online investigators were digging. A subreddit titled "Justice for Alora" uncovered a disturbing pattern. 4 other black students expelled from Brightmoor between 1998 and 2010 for integrity violations. All high performers in math or science. One of them, Lisa Fenwick, had won a national coding competition. Another, Terrence Dean, had published a paper as a sophomore. None had been allowed to appeal their expulsions. And none had been given legal support. A spreadsheet circulated online. Headline: "The Brightmoor Purge." The implication was devastating. Alora wasn't an outlier. She was part of a system. Then the story took a turn no one expected. A woman named Naomi Bishop emailed the student paper. She didn't use her real name in the subject. She used her old title, former Registrar Estadurgent. "I have proof." Attached was a scan of a handwritten memo, dated March. It read, "Upon verbal instruction from Dean March, file SIN 205 EG is to be sealed and unlisted from the active student directory. Do not forward this order. Do not keep a copy. File destruction pending. Initialed, NB." The email said, "I kept it. I was afraid back then. But I can't be quiet anymore. This wasn't just policy. It was purging. I remember shredding 2 other files before this. All black students. All honors level. I'll talk if you protect me." The newspaper verified her employment record. She had worked in the registrar's office from 2. They printed her statement. Front page. "Whistleblower speaks. Files were erased to hide discrimination." The story cracked Brightmoor wide open. National media picked it up. The Department of Education issued a statement. The ACLU announced it was monitoring the case. Civil rights attorneys contacted Alora, offering pro bono representation. And inside Brightmoor's gates, students marched with a new chant. "Who else did you erase?" That night, Alora sat with Talia in her apartment. The TV glowed. The headline read, "Former Registrar, They ordered us to delete her. Talia turned to her. It's time. You have to speak. They can't fight shadows anymore. Alora stared at the screen, then at her old notebook. They'll try to silence me again. Then let them try. But not while we're silent. A whistleblower emerges, and she used to work in the registrar's office. She has proof that Alora's file was deliberately erased, and she's ready to testify. The envelope was plain. The contents, anything but. Inside, over 50 pages of scanned memos, internal emails, and unauthorized copies of archived student records, all meticulously gathered and preserved by Naomi Bishop during her years in the registrar's office. For nearly 2 decades, the documents had sat in a locked filing box in her attic. Not out of defiance, but survival. I was afraid, she confessed during her first on-camera interview with the student newspaper. But I always knew I'd need to give this to someone when the moment was right. That moment had come. At first the pattern was subtle. A file here, a recommendation withdrawn there. But then it grew. Between 1997 and 2013, there were 22 expulsion cases, involving black students with GPAs above 3.8, all for vague, often unverifiable integrity violations. None were allowed to appeal. None were granted legal counsel. 6 had been national competition winners. 3 had secured provisional patents for inventions. 2 had published undergrad research in peer-reviewed journals, all erased. And Alora Gaines had simply been the most recent name on a long list of brilliance buried beneath bureaucracy. The files spread fast. Within 48 hours, they were published by major outlets. The Washington Post called it an institutional pattern of academic erasure. CNN aired a primetime segment, The Alora Files. ProPublica launched an independent investigation. Civil rights organizations stepped in. The NAACP issued a statement. The ACLU began preparing a case. Twitter exploded with the hashtag Brightmoor Blackout. Professors from around the country shared their own stories of bias and systemic suppression. Alumni called Brightmoor a sanitized plantation with Wi-Fi. What had started as a viral video was now a national movement. And Alora, for the first time, wasn't just seen, she was believed. Inside Brightmoor, the panic was palpable. Dean Evans canceled 2 weeks of public appearances. Dr. Barrick declined interviews. Security on campus was quietly increased, though no threat had been made. In a desperate press conference, the university president appeared with stiff hands and a shallow voice. We take these allegations seriously. A task force will be assembled. We ask the public for patience. It was a performance, and everyone knew it. The next morning, students marched again. This time holding enlarged printouts of the expelled students' names. At the front, they carried a banner with a single phrase, "You didn't delete us. You delayed us." In her apartment, Alora sat on her couch, surrounded by stacks of the files Naomi had unearthed. She held a photo of Terrence Dean, the young man expelled 2 years before her. He'd won an award for quantum algorithm efficiency. He'd disappeared after expulsion. There was no record of him after Alora whispered. They buried us with paperwork. Talia sat nearby, flipping through another file. But now we're digging up bones. And the whole world's watching. That same evening, Alora received a letter. Elegant stationery. No return address. Inside, a brief typed message.
Miss Gaines,
We have reviewed your case. We believe your civil rights were violated at multiple levels. We are prepared to reopen your 205 expulsion and pursue full legal remedy. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely,
Evers, Longwell and Patch LLP.
Civil Rights Division. She read it twice, then a third time. Talia leaned over her shoulder. They want to fight for you. Alora stared ahead. Then maybe it's time I stop fighting alone. A major law firm offers to represent Alora and reopen her original expulsion case. For the first time in 20 years, she has a legal voice. And Brightmoor has something new to fear. The truth, in court. The courtroom smelled like pine polish and tension. Brightmoor University sat across from Alora Gaines, not just as a defendant, but as an institution laid bare. The world watched. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the hall outside buzzed with journalists, activists, former students, and faculty pretending not to watch. It wasn't just Alora's name on the line now. It was the truth. The plaintiff, Alora Gaines, 38, formerly expelled under academic misconduct, now suing Brightmoor University for wrongful expulsion, racial discrimination, defamation, and systemic civil rights violations. The defense, a university cloaked in prestige, now unraveling under scrutiny. Opening statements were brutal. Her attorney from Evers, Longwell and Thatch, stood calmly before the jury. "We are here because a 17-year-old black girl was silenced. Her life was derailed, her brilliance buried, and when she quietly resurfaced, they tried to erase her again. This is not just a lawsuit, it is a reckoning." The defense leaned on performance. Brightmore's lead attorney painted Alora as a brilliant but unstable individual who never enrolled and fabricated a story for fame. He referenced her janitorial employment as a calculated ruse. "It is easy to create genius on paper," he said. "It is harder to prove it in fact." But Alora's lawyers had proof. Student records, yearbooks, award photos, the leaked registrar memos, testimonies from professors who remembered her promise, the whistleblower's statement. Still, the university leaned on doubt, and when they called their math expert to the stand, a tenured professor from Yale, they expected to close the case. But Alora didn't flinch. She requested to cross-examine him herself. The court murmured. Her attorney nodded. The judge hesitated, then allowed it. Alora rose from her seat, walked slowly to the stand, and with poise that silenced the room, she began. "Dr. Hemsley," she said, voice clear, "can you walk us through your interpretation of this equation?" She wrote a single line on the easel. A composite calculus expression, embedded in a system of nonlinear constraints. He blinked. "That wasn't in the case file." "No," she said. "It's from your dissertation." That page. The courtroom shifted. He stammered, tried, fumbled. Alora tilted her head. "Would you like me to solve it for you?" Gasps rippled through the gallery. She turned to the easel, and with quiet precision, walked through the solution, not only solving it, but improving on the method he had published 20 years prior. She stepped back. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. "No further questions," she said, returning to her seat. Even the judge exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Outside, the media caught wind instantly. Janitor cross-examines Yale professor in math showdown. Courtroom erupts as plaintiff outmaths Ivy League witness. Alora said nothing to the cameras, but her name trended for days. The jury took notes furiously. Her calm dismantling of the university's credibility had done more than expose bias. It had exposed fear. Fear of what she represented, a mind they couldn't control. Then came the final blow. Her lawyer requested the court order Brightmore to produce her original academic records, grades, transcripts, scholarship letters. The judge granted the motion, but days later the university responded. "We regret to inform the court that Ms. Gaines' academic file from 2005 is missing." Whispers filled the courtroom. Her attorney stood. "Missing? Entirely?" The university's lawyer nodded. "We believe it may have been lost during a database migration. There is no paper file." The judge looked unconvinced. "So the file that proves she was ever a student conveniently disappeared?" "We are as shocked as you are, Your Honor." Alora sat motionless, but her fingers, clenched in her lap, told a different story. The court demands Brightmore produce Alora's original academic records. They respond with one word: missing. But Alora knows that's a lie, and she knows exactly who destroyed them. The lie didn't sit for long. When Brightmore claimed Alora Gaines's academic file had been lost in a system migration, the courtroom collectively held its breath. Judges had heard that excuse before, in cover-ups, in scandals, in stories that always fell apart. But this time someone made sure it would. An anonymous tip landed in the inbox of Alora's legal team 2 days later. Subject line: "They didn't lose it. They destroyed it." Attached were 2 time-stamped emails. The first, dated 6 weeks before the trial, was a directive from an internal Brightmore administrator. Per instruction from Dr. March, please remove and shred all archived paper files from the 2005 integrity violations case batch. Digital indexes will be modified accordingly. Urgent. The second was a digital deletion request. Sent 2 hours later. Purge student ID Jim 205 EG78 from backup servers before next sync. Alora read them in silence. Her attorney looked at her. "They didn't just erase your story. They tried to erase your existence." The revelation hit the court like a gavel. Brightmore's attorneys stumbled to respond. They claimed the directive had been a miscommunication, that the file was part of a larger archive restructuring, not targeted deletion. The judge was unconvinced. She issued an emergency subpoena for all related digital data. That's when the twist landed. A junior IT contractor outsourced, underpaid, and long overlooked. Contacted the legal team. He had found something, buried deep in an off-site cloud server backup, was a forgotten mirror of Brightmoor's database. Tom stamped it, untouched, and Alora's full record was there. Everything. Her enrollment letter. Her perfect math placement exam. Her GPA 4.0. Her award photo. Her scholarship terms. Her expulsion memo, marked expedited, no hearing required. The courtroom gasped as pages were printed and presented. The judge examined each one with a growing frown. Alora's lawyer leaned in, voice like thunder. They didn't misplace her. They buried her. The media exploded. Digital resurrection. Alora's academic truth unearthed, shredded but not silenced. Social feeds filled with side-by-side screenshots of her deleted file. And the backup. Students walked campus holding signs that read, "You tried to erase her. You erased yourselves." Brightmoor's board held an emergency session. Publicly, they remained silent. Privately, they burned. But instead of settling the lawsuit, they took a darker route. In an act of desperation, or defiance, Brightmoor filed a countersuit against Alora Gaines. Claim defamation and reputational harm. They accused her of knowingly spreading misinformation, of damaging the university's standing, and of encouraging unlawful protests. The country stood still. Students erupted in outrage. Legal scholars condemned it as retaliatory. Alora, however, stayed calm. "It's fear," she told her lawyer. "They're not suing me. They're suing the truth." Then an envelope arrived at Alora's door. No return address. Just a thin, padded mailer. Inside, a flash drive. And a note, handwritten. "I was wrong. And I knew it then."
What?
She plugged it into her laptop. It was an audio file. Recorded in a voice she hadn't heard in 20 years. "This is Professor Richard Thorne. I'm recording this because I can't stay quiet forever. Today I sat in a room where we voted to expel Alora Gaines. I knew she didn't cheat. We all did. But we were told to move forward. For optics. For simplicity." The audio continued. "They said she was too smart. That she made other students uncomfortable. That her success would create pressure to make more exceptions. I regret my silence." Alora closed her eyes. She remembered Thorne. He had once praised her work, then gone cold overnight. Now he was retired, and ready to tell the truth. A retired professor contacts Alora with a taped confession from 2005. His voice confirms what she always knew. Her expulsion was intentional, political, and racist. And now the court will hear it. Richard Thorne had once been a rising academic star at Brightmoor University. A tenured professor of mathematics with a decorated resume and a quiet, bookish demeanor. But by the time his voice echoed across the courtroom 20 years later, his body lay in a hospice bed, frail, hollow-eyed, and tethered to an oxygen tank. The tape was played on a small speaker system in the courtroom. Alora sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly in her lap. The gallery behind her was packed with students, journalists, activists, and professors, some leaning forward, others frozen in disbelief. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. The judge gave a nod, and the tape began. Thorne's voice was slow, raspy. "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it. But that's why I recorded it. Because this truth shouldn't die with me." Gasps stirred in the room. He continued. "In 2005, I was called into a private meeting with Dean March, Dr. Barrick, and 2 members from Academic Integrity. We discussed Alora Gaines's exam results. I told them her work was extraordinary, unquestionably her own." He paused. The next line dropped like lead. "They told me it wasn't about the math. It was about the perception." Alora's breath caught. "They said she intimidated other students. That the board was nervous. One of them even said, 'We can't have her be the face of the department.' I knew what that meant. We all did." A silence settled. "They asked me to go along with a cheating allegation. Told me it would be easier for everyone. Said we'd seal it. Quietly. She'd move on." He coughed. "I said yes. I signed the memo. I watched her scholarship vanish. I watched her leave. And I never forgave myself." He drew a long breath. Then, "I want this on record. Alora Gaines did not cheat. She was one of the most brilliant minds I'd ever seen. Her only crime was shining too brightly in a room built to keep her dim." The tape clicked off. The courtroom remained in stunned silence. Not a breath. Not a shuffle. Then Alora let out a sound that broke the spell. A sob. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Her attorney placed a hand gently on her back. Across the aisle, the university's legal team sat paralyzed. Barrick's jaw tightened. The dean stared at the table. And the jury, they watched Alora. Not with pity, with rage, with disbelief, with knowing. Outside the courthouse, the public already knew. The audio had been published simultaneously by the student paper and national outlets. News anchors played it between segments. Op-eds flooded the internet. Protesters camped outside held banners that now read, "Confession recorded. Justice required." Inside, Brightmoor's legal team scrambled. That evening, they filed an emergency motion to suppress the tape. Their argument? Thorne was deceased. The recording was hearsay. The defense hadn't been given time to cross-examine. The confession, they said, would prejudice the jury unfairly. It was a last-ditch effort. The motion landed in Judge Hernandez's hands by morning. The courtroom reconvened at noon. Alora sat motionless as the judge flipped through the printed transcripts, then removed her glasses. "I have read the motion. I have reviewed the transcript. And I have considered the unprecedented nature of this testimony." A pause. "Let me be clear. This court does not bend to the convenience of timing. We serve justice." She looked squarely at Brightmoor's attorneys. "You claim the tape is prejudicial. It is. Because it tells the truth." Murmurs rippled across the gallery. Motion to suppress denied. The tape remains in evidence. Then she turned to the clerk. "Set a date for closing arguments. And prepare the jury for final instructions." The judge overrules Brightmoor's motion to suppress the professor's taped confession and sets the date for final verdict. The institution is cornered, and Alora is one step from justice or destruction. On the morning of the verdict, the courthouse steps looked like a vigil, and a celebration collided. Protesters, professors, reporters, and former students filled the street, many holding chalkboards. Equations scrawled across them like banners of resistance. Some wore shirts with Alora's photo under the phrase, "She solved it." Inside, the air was electric. Alora sat at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, eyes calm, but her heart thudded like it had a clock of its own. 20 years of silence, shame, and systemic violence narrowed into this moment. Behind her, Talia gripped the armrest like it might fly away. Her attorneys nodded respectfully. The jury filed in. 12 faces. All unrateable. The foreperson stood. "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." A paper was handed forward. The judge read silently. Then she turned to the court. "In the matter of Gaines v. Brightmoor University, on the count of wrongful expulsion, we find in favor of the plaintiff." A collective gasp. "On the count of racial discrimination, in favor of the plaintiff."
On the count of defamation, in favor of the plaintiff.
"On the count of civil rights violations, in favor of the plaintiff." Then she turned directly to Alora. "The court hereby reverses the 205 expulsion of Alora Gaines, orders Brightmoor University to reinstate her academic standing, clear her name publicly, and pay financial and punitive damages, totaling $12 million. The courtroom erupted. Students wept. Journalists scrambled. A cheer broke out from the back. But Alora didn't move. She sat there still as stone, eyes glistening, until the judge added, "And finally, Brightmoor University is ordered to issue a formal public apology within 7 days." That broke her. A single tear slipped down her cheek. It wasn't the money. It was the sentence, public apology. The silence would end. Outside, the world responded in real time. National outlets cut to live footage. Legal analysts called it one of the most significant academic civil rights rulings in decades. Former students from Brightmoor who had buried their own stories began coming forward. Hashtags exploded. "In Alora won," "Say her name," "She solved it." Commentators praised her restraint. Lawmakers promised reform. And across campuses nationwide, Black students held vigils of victory. In one interview, a student leader said, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised her proof." That's power. Brightmoor's official response arrived 3 days later. A prepared statement read by a visibly shaken Dean Evans, flanked by board members and lawyers. "We acknowledge the court's ruling and accept full responsibility for the actions taken against Ms. Alora Gaines. We extend our sincerest apologies for the harm caused and commit to a complete review of our institutional practices." There were no questions, but there were consequences. Dr. Barrick resigned the next morning. Dean March disappeared from campus. 2 trustees stepped down quietly. And yet, Alora gave no comment. No interview. No statement. She simply walked out of the courthouse that day, notebook in hand, past the microphones, past the cameras, into the sunlight. Talia caught up to her. "You did it," she whispered. Alora exhaled slowly. "We did it." The following week, her apartment mailbox held a single white envelope. No fanfare. No branding. Inside, "Dear Miss Gaines, it is with deep respect that we extend an invitation to join our faculty as a visiting scholar in mathematics. Your story has inspired not only our department, but a generation of thinkers. We would be honored to have you." Signed, Langston Institute of Technology. Beneath it, another form. Nomination certificate, National Fellowship for Mathematical Innovation. Talia stared at it, breathless. "They're giving you your future back." Alora looked down. "No," she said. "They're finally getting out of the way." Alora receives a letter offering her a teaching position at another university and a national fellowship in math, but one name on the fellowship committee list makes her freeze. It's someone she never thought she'd face again. The campus of Langston Institute of Technology was a world away from Brightmoor's ivy-clad towers. Red brick buildings stood proudly beneath southern skies, their paths lined with magnolia trees and student laughter. Alora walked through it quietly the morning of her first class, feeling the hum of a place where she didn't have to shrink to fit. Langston was an HBCU with legacy and pride. Here the walls didn't whisper warnings. They echoed resilience. She entered the lecture hall not as a janitor, not as a footnote, but as Professor Alora Gaines. Her name glowed on the digital welcome board. The students, black, brown, brilliant-eyed, looked up at her with curiosity, then reverence. Not because she was famous, but because she belonged to them. She was them. Her first words were soft but firm. "My name is Alora Gaines. I'm here to teach you calculus. But first, let me tell you why they tried to stop me." The room stilled. She spoke not of revenge, but reclamation, of turning pain into precision, of how numbers had never lied to her, even when institutions did. She didn't teach to prove them wrong. She taught to prove her students right. Her course became one of the most sought after on campus. Students from other universities audited her lectures online. Her notes, published weekly, were downloaded by educators nationwide. She challenged her students to invent, to question, to build, and they did. One student created a calculus-driven traffic algorithm that got picked up by a city planning firm. Another published a paper on predictive modeling in climate change. Alora cheered them all. Each success, a middle finger to the system that once told her brilliance had a complexion. Meanwhile, Brightmoor bled quietly. Enrollment dropped by 14% in one semester. Donors pulled funding. A third of faculty signed a petition demanding structural reform. The Department of Education launched a formal inquiry. Their silence had come at a cost. Alora declined every interview, except one. A documentary team from PBS approached her with a simple premise. Not the scandal. The journey. She agreed. The documentary Brilliance Buried, the Alora Gaines story, aired during Black History Month. It shattered viewing records, drawing praise from educators, activists, and everyday viewers who saw in Alora the battles they'd never spoken aloud. She didn't cry on camera. She taught. With a marker in hand and a whiteboard behind her. She solved a problem no one had solved before. Live. By the time the credits rolled, applications to Langston tripled. Her book came next. Titled The Equation They Feared, it blended memoir and mathematics, revealing the structures designed to confine her, and how she turned each one into a stepping stone. Chapters read like formulas for resistance. Let brilliance be louder than bias. Let silence be broken by precision. Let trauma equal transformation. It debuted at N3 on the nonfiction bestseller list. And then came the conference. It was held in New Orleans, an academic summit on equity in STEM. Alora was the keynote speaker. Her talk, Proof Over Prejudice, received a standing ovation. As she stepped off the stage, surrounded by handshakes and flashing cameras, she spotted him. Dr. Colin Barrick, standing near the refreshment table, older now, grayer, eyes tired. He approached slowly, hands empty, face unreadable. Talia saw him first and stepped protectively closer, but Alora lifted her hand. Let him. At a conference celebrating equity in education, Alora sees Dr. Barrick, the man who once tried to destroy her, walking toward her. But what he says next will shock her more than anything he ever did in court. Dr. Colin Barrick stood with his hands folded in front of him, a posture too humble to be accidental. Alora watched him approach, her mind flashing back to that lecture hall, to the way he had looked at her like a stain he couldn't scrub off his institution. Now, his suit hung looser, his jawline had softened, but his eyes, the ones that once gleamed with smug certainty, were unsure, almost pleading. "Professor Gaines," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. She met his gaze. Calm. "Dr. Barrick." He nodded once, as if acknowledging the reversal. Then took a breath. "I came, not to explain. Just to say I was wrong. Deeply. Not just about your talent, but about who gets to belong." Alora didn't speak. "I watched you solve a theorem that stumped me for a decade," he continued, "and I still tried to frame it as a fluke. Not because you weren't brilliant. Because I couldn't accept that brilliance could wear overalls." The conference buzzed around them, people laughing, clinking coffee cups, celebrating equity. But for a moment, they stood in silence. "I lost everything after the trial," Barrick said quietly. "Tenure, credibility, respect. I deserve that. But I also know I owe you an apology." He paused. "I'm sorry, Alora." Her name from his mouth felt like both theft and restoration. She let the words hang, then spoke slowly. "I'm not angry anymore. That would give you too much space in my story." He winced. She continued. "Forgiveness isn't a formula, Dr. Barrick. It's not owed. It's earned." She stepped past him toward the main hall where her students waited. "I hope you find peace. But I found mine without your apology." He didn't follow. Months passed. Alora's book went into its third printing. Her course was accredited as a national model for math instruction. She was invited to consult on educational reform panels. A school in Mississippi renamed their STEM building after her. But she stayed at Langston. She still brought fresh chalk to every class. Still kept a stack of old notebooks in her bag. Still reminded students on their worst days, "You don't owe them silence. Only excellence." And they listened. Then came a letter. This time, not from a university. From the White House. Official seal. Heavy paper. Signed by the president. "Dear Professor Alora Gaines, on behalf of the National Science Foundation and the Office of the President, it is our honor to inform you that you have been nominated for the National Medal of Science, the highest scientific recognition in the United States. Your contributions to mathematics, education, and equity have inspired a nation. We are proud to celebrate not only what you have discovered, but who you chose to become. Sincerely, Office of the President." Talia screamed when she read it. Alora just laughed softly. "They almost erased me," she said. "And now—" She stopped, then smiled. "Now they have to write me into history." Alora is nominated for the National Medal of Science. And this time, the committee doesn't ask what she wore when she changed the world, only how she did it. They tried to silence her with shame, erase her with lies, but she turned every scar into a statement. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you don't belong, her fight is your fight. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.